The first 3 weeks of the eruption here in Hawaii, crazy things would happen in the middle of the night. A new fissure would open up and it would threaten a new neighborhood. Thousands of people were evacuated from their homes. I started the Hawaii Tracker Facebook group to help people understand what's going on and get their questions answered.
Hey, how's it going? We're live. This is Fissure 20.
We had hundreds of people all throughout the neighborhoods sending in videos, articles, and images. We spend a lot of time making sure the accurate information gets out.
This is live. There's still lava moving.
They weren't just sharing a story, they were helping their neighbor. If a family was being evacuated, my group would just jump in and help out. So it was huge. They were watching out for each other.
Hello everybody, thank you for coming. Thank you for the support from everybody.
As we go through this, we're growing closer together as a community. When tragedies like this strike, you really realize how much you need each other.
Aloha everyone, I'm geologist Philip Ong, here with Mr. Dan DuPont of HawaiiTracker.com, bringing you guys another Hawaiian volcano tracker update. Today is Thursday, December 15th, 2022. Both volcanoes are in technically a pause of magma coming up into them at least, as defined by the USGS. But they're doing it a little bit differently today. Mauna Loa is just glowing here and there from the places we've seen it flowing, and Kilauea is putting on a little bit of a show even during pause with the lava lake overturning here.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting just to see like every 3 hours or so roughly this overturning event seems to be taking place, and we get to see a glimpse of that fresh lava lake, the return of the glow, and then it kind of quickly dies out and we do it again. That's been the story since yesterday, a little bit before now, since noon. But yeah, we'll talk about that. But it's interesting for sure.
Yeah, so that's the long and short of it here. We do have a busy month coming up next month. USGS is doing Volcano Awareness Month, and we'll bring you guys all that content as well. And that includes presentations by the scientists, includes some of the outdoor scenery and walks. And so we'll figure out how we can best do that for you guys. So if any of you guys has been following us through Mauna Loa and wondering what we're going to talk about now that both volcanoes are in pause, and you haven't followed us for the last 4 years, believe me, there's plenty is going on underground, plenty of things to talk about, and plenty of questions come in, so we'll just keep at it as usual. Today we might go a little bit shorter possibly, but we'll see how that turns out here. Just because...
We always say that. We always say that.
I always say that. I'm still trying to improve incrementally, so we'll see how we get there. So
Alright.
we'll take questions for sure. Let Dan know your questions. He'll be leading discussion on chat, and let him know if you have any issues with our audio or our video, and he'll work on that as well. Anything else, Dan, before we jump into it here?
Yeah, just make sure to get your questions in. We will try and save up some of them that I can't answer or are interesting, and we'll pass them to Philip at the end of the program to let him have a crack at them.
Cool. All right, so let's transition here and blow up this picture that's here between us. This is an image I pulled from the V1 camera from last night, showing that lava lake in Kilauea. And so this is the summary of what's happening on the volcano. As Kilauea doesn't look exactly like this at the present moment, but not too different. I'll zoom it out so you can see a little bit more clearly. There's a whole lava lake surface, and it's actually just recrusting in this case from left to right. We'll talk about that when we talk about Kilauea here after Mauna Loa. But let's summarize what's happening in Mauna Loa just briefly. I thought the best way to do that would be to show you guys this plot of the tilt for the last month, and the blue line is the one showing the volcano either swelling out when a volcano is when a line is going up, or sagging back when it's going back down like that. So what we're interested in is in the last week here, the volcano has been reinflating, but it's doing so at slower and slower rates here within the last few days. So that's really the story of Mauna Loa. It continues to equilibrate underground. Its magma seems to not be pushing to the shallow signals like it was recently here. And that's the zoomed out version. Zoomed in, it looks a little bit more like this. It's still rising, but it's definitely not rising as quickly as it was even earlier in the week. So that's the summary there. We will include the USGS updates for the last week here. There have been several, but the most important one came on Tuesday morning, when first Kilauea at 7:12 a.m. was downgraded from alert level advisory to alert level watch, and from aviation code orange to aviation code yellow. That's because by that point in time, they determined Kilauea no longer erupting, with lava supply ceased on December 9th based upon lava lake levels and behavior of the crater floor. We'll see later that actually will say potentially December 6th to 9th, somewhere in that time frame. So this is already on the 13th when this is issued, right? So it's already been close to a week of that activity in Kilauea. So that's pretty standard there. I could go down into more detail, but there's really not a lot there. We'll note that at 7:17 a.m. that same morning on Tuesday, USGS lowered Mauna Loa volcanoes alert level from watch to advisory, and aviation code from orange to yellow as well. So on Mauna Loa's, they note Mauna Loa is no longer erupting. Lava supply ceased on December 10th. That's the day that they were saying that the supply ceased there. And sulfur dioxide emissions have decreased to near pre-eruption background levels. Tremor and earthquakes associated with eruption are greatly diminished as well. So that's most of it here, but there is a little bit more worth noting. Spots of incandescence, glow, right? That's the science-y word for glow there. Spots of incandescence may remain near the vent, along channels, and at the flow front for days or weeks as the lava flow cools. However, eruptive activity is not expected to return based on past eruptive behavior. Summit and Northeast Rift Zone inflation continues. And continuing monitoring, and that's most of that as well. But it's worth noting here that the USGS is making it pretty clear what their definition is to determine a pause, right? They're talking about magma supply to the eruption site being ceased. So even though we know, and we'll show you guys, that the actual vent continues to glow a little bit, that parts of the lava channel, the upper channel, and then the lower flow front as well, all continue to glow still as well. And culturally, that is very much still an alive flow, right? That's still Pele there. Scientifically, they're making a distinction and saying that the magma supply is what's determining their alerts and status and descriptions of the situation here. So they say no longer erupting, but technically speaking, you actually can go to Mauna Loa and see red glow from the lava flow front, and you can go to Kilauea and see red glow from the lava overturning and the lava lake both as well. So just a little nuance there to try to bridge the gap there between a science talk and everyday thinking here. So that's the updates. I would like to, let's see here, switch it up a little bit today, and we're actually going to throw on here our community slides because the first one is relevant to this. County Hawaii announcement that Mauna Loa traffic hazard mitigation route to close effective Friday, December 16th. That's tomorrow. I guess you can't see that bottom part on there. Let me put that up. There you go. It's effective Friday, December 16th, 2022. And so just note that as a county announcement. And then from the USGS, this week's Volcano Watch, actually, so we'll kind of lump them both into one here. USGS Volcano Watch. Did Hawaiian volcanoes get your attention recently? Keep up your volcano awareness next month. And here they note the Volcano Awareness Month coming up in January with all the range of talks and walks to help maintain volcano awareness. So I won't go through all of this, of course, but just to note that we're going to be discussing that as well. And there's plenty to talk about, of course. But I thought I would highlight here they have some of the questions that they have looking forward that there are no answers to, right? But what does it mean for future activity that lava supply to both volcanoes appears to have ceased within about a day? Right? Is that because of the influence of the stresses at the surface? What will happen next? Will Mauna Loa take another long break or enter a phase of more frequent eruptions? Will the lava lake at Kilauea summit start to grow again? And those are all things that are still pending, and by next month we'll have a lot more information and be able to go into the science of it with you guys. So I just wanted to go through that community couple items real quick and then move right into our volcanic hazard summary, which most frequently is taking the form of gas and fog. Right? We did have the issue of the lava coming towards the highway recently, but that flow is still inching along, settling, creeping, but not really a hazard towards any infrastructure. So really it's the fog. And for the first time in a long time, our map looks like it shows almost no fog here at all. And that's because Mauna Loa is below detection limits, and Kilauea is put in at 194 tons per day as their value that they're putting into this model. So very little fog impact for once. It's been a long time since that's been the case. It's been a long time since neither volcano was erupting. So here we're back in that phase of a lot less fog and a lot less impact. And just along those lines, I thought I'd bring up purple air one more time here. And there you can see all the green all the way around. And it is noteworthy that there are occasionally other stations. Here's one that looks to be on the east slope of Mauna Kea, showing orange, and there's something yellow over here on the Makua coast as well. So this is picking up for whatever it may be, whether it's dust or fire or some other local effect. And it's just a good reminder of the inclusiveness of these data. It's not just volcanic stuff, but one good way to track within the communities what the conditions are, especially along the Kona coast here. All right, so that's the hazards. Let's move through to our earthquakes. And I'll snap. Let's get this to load again here. USGS earthquakes, and I have them shown now for the whole last week. So that's what this is colored by time. So yellow is within the last week, orange is within the last couple hours, or within the last day, and red within the last couple hours. So you see that most of this is yellow, most of this is happening within the last week. But just to show you guys, even within the last week, not a lot of action on Mauna Loa here. A couple of earthquakes on either side, a couple down here on the Kona side, and Kilauea's got a lot more within the last week around its summit area. Not as much in the flanks or elsewhere. And then this is all deep Pahala stuff over here that we can, for today, we'll ignore that. So if I come up here and I change the settings from last day to just last 7 days to just the last day, then let's look at this map again. You actually see just one earthquake on Kilauea at 1.0 and nothing here on Mauna Loa at all. So really quiet earthquake-wise as well. So it's a little bit of a reprieve, a break for the lava, for the fog, for the earthquakes, all happening kind of at the same time. It's interesting here. So now we'll move into Mauna Loa signals more properly. So let's talk about Mauna Loa monitoring. And I showed you guys this tilt plot for the last week up here at the top. And once again, it was rising steeper earlier in the week. And now it seems to be still rising, but at a slower rate. We're actually, if I zoom it in, see if I can zoom it in, you actually can see this at the beginning of these diurnal daily variations that we've been seeing for a long time, but now superimposed upon that longer signal of that slow rise. And as I showed you before, I like to zoom it out because it really shows you that bigger picture here of that whole rebound phase, right after the magma was deflating the volcano because it was all coming out, and we saw this one shallow earthquake. Now, in hindsight, appears to be some early association of that turnaround, right, where the eruption was coming close to running out of pressure to to keep pushing out. We saw an adjustment at the summit, and then the tilt turned around, came back up, faster at first, and now more shallowly, and it seems to be equilibrating. That's the underground signal of Mauna Loa there. And the GPS showing a similar thing. There is that bounce back, and of course, because this is now a 4-year-long plot, and we only get one point per day as opposed to continuously at the top, it'll take longer for us to see whether this is going to turn over and exactly how it's going to look, at what angle it's going to come up here. So that's the Mauna Loa monitoring signals. If I keep moving this down, you can see earthquakes for the last week in Mauna Loa, pretty quiet across the board. So she's recharging and refilling there, but doesn't seem to be stressing much about it. And there's earthquake counts for the last month, so down significantly. For the last year, crashing downwards as well. And for the last 5 years, we'll have to wait for the full month to conclude here, but zooming it in there, it's going to crash down as well. And for the last 5 years, there's a buildup from 2018 and a number of earthquakes coming up slowly and then pulsing and quieting and then really coming full on here last month. So that's Mauna Loa's monitoring signals. We'll look at some of the visuals from Mauna Loa, and that's likely what people are wondering about. What do you mean glow? What's the glow look like? So here is back since Monday. This is the M8 camera, and you see a little bit of flashes of glow coming from in here, and I haven't really filtered this much at all. So you see occasional flashes of glow. You see the weather coming in and out, so it's hard to tell whether it's just the weather blocking the glow sometimes. But when you look closely, you can continue to see little pixels of red, very, very faint in this area right in here. So very, very little bit. This camera is about a mile from this vent. So from this angle, that's how much it's seeing. Not a whole lot, but a little bit there. I put it on the M5 camera. This is looking from the side. The other one was looking more in that direction, so we're looking straight on. The mouth of the thing is on this side, so kind of horseshoes, kind of like that. So let me play this for you guys. Back since Monday as well. And you can more clearly see the glowing spot there at the top of the cone, and you zoom it in so you can see a little better there. There's a cone. You see a little bit of glow continuing every night, glowing a little bit there, visible on a webcam. Go more times since I haven't quite zoomed it in at the beginning. Right, so it's likely something in the pit, and it's reflecting on one of these upper walls or something along those lines. And that's picking up in this camera from this angle. And still plenty of steam coming out from this area around as well. Let's look at the M4 camera. This is the one up at the upper channel. So the vent is somewhere up in this direction over here, off in that direction over there, and the lava is flowing down the channel. Was flowing down the channel in this direction, and largely it's drained out here. But going back to Monday, you can actually see there's a little bit of an ooze up, an ooze out that leaks out in this channel, and it keeps glowing a little bit too. And no more movement after Monday night, but you do continue to see the glowing spots along that channel there. So one more time, let me zoom it in. Let's play it for you guys so you can actually see a little ooze out from the channel a little more closely. And there it is. It only lasts, like that one night really, and then the next night it's just glowing but not moving at all. So there's still a little bit of wind down activity happening, right? And this is all under the definition of no magma coming into the vent, therefore the eruption being over. So kind of the waning effects here in the waning stages of this post-eruptive phase, right? That's the M4. We'll do a couple more. This is the M9 down by the traffic hazard mitigation route. So I see a lot of weather come through, but right in here is where you see that flow front. And you see it's still glowing in the night. There's a couple other spots. You see a little flashing here and there. And weather coming through. And once again, let me zoom it way in more. Get a better view of that since it's so few pixels on the screen. And let's replay it. There's that flow front, and sorry for the strobiness here, gray flashing, but that's what weather is like, hit and miss. And there's that glow in the flow front there, right? So it's completely possible to still come out here and potentially with like a long exposure still get a really amazing image of this whole wind down phase with all the glow and still spots of incandescence coming from all along that flow. I thought I'd show one more, and this is just the MK2 camera we've been watching for a while. So up at the top is where the vent would be, and the flow front down here at the bottom, and just to compare to what we saw before, you see a couple of spots of glow popping in down here and a couple of pixels popping in up here as well. But that's really it. And so from the further and further away you are, and the more weather you're trying to look through, the less and less you'll see nowadays. It's interesting. If you look, you actually can see if I can pause it and pull it back here. But there's a couple spots where you see the orange flashing down here at the flow front, and it looks like it matches up with what we see from that M9 camera too. So that's the Mauna Kea visuals here today. I'm sorry, Mauna Loa visuals today. This is the last camera from Mauna Kea. And with that, we'll switch to looking at Kilauea, and looking first at Kilauea's monitoring signals. That's what you see here. For the last month first, here's that tilt signal. We're actually coming out of a deflation-inflation event, which is this normal background. That makes it hard to tell what the actual trend is, but you can see it looked like it was rising here for the last couple weeks. And especially so for the last week, maybe less so here and then more so here. So we have to see how far up this inflationary phase of this cycle comes up. Maybe we'll have a little bit better idea. But that's the shallower signal, and the deeper signal, if we scroll down to the GPS, 1 year summit GPS here, we're still seeing unchanged this line increasing in value. So the two sides of the summit of Kilauea are still spreading apart, and that's because it's being filled from magma at depth. So that's still the long-term trend, hasn't changed. Rift zone still showing the opposite trend of sagging and deflating as the sides come together. So that's the underground pattern. Gas measurements, the last gas measurement reported here at 190. It's a very bottom right of this plot here. So the last couple we've had have been in the 300 to 400 range, and this always looks like a similar plot, but what really matters a lot is the scale on the side, how many tons per day. And we're only going from 150 to 400, whereas in the past we've seen a lot more, right? So that's why I like to show this year-long plot as well, where it really is showing from 6,000 at the top, there's 0, and it goes to negative. You can ignore that part of it. But you see the full range of values, of fluctuations across. But really, let's look at the highest values here. Highest values up around 5,000 to 6,000 tons per day, and then coming down to 4,000 tons per day by summer, and then by fall it's down to 3,000, 2,000 tons per day, and then in late October it was down to 1,000 tons per day, and here we are in a couple hundred range. So it's really it's interesting to consider what's happening with Kilauea and Mauna Loa together, but you can see that the long-term trend of Kilauea has been down on this trend for quite a while already, much longer than Mauna Loa has been showing her hand. So that's the SO2 measurement, and if you are looking at the lava depth, here it is up here, you see some more of this variation as it was slowly draining prior to and concurrently with Mauna Loa eruption. And then we have, this is the real abrupt drain, crusting over stage was right in here. And then we had some ooze-up flows that came and flowed on top of that crust and made it a little bit taller, but really it's flattened out since then, and that's the long-term pattern there. If you try to look at the last week plots, there's a tilt, and it's really hard to tell anything. There's so many variations here, deflation, inflation event, another one, so we can't really see any long-term trend. And with the lava depth, you can just see it pretty much flat the entire time with some noise from measurements through steam or rain clouds kind of thing. So the 1 month is a little bit more understandable today. So that is the Kilauea monitoring and showing the magma coming in there at depth. So let's just show you guys to round it off here. I might actually make it a little shorter today, Dane. So you're going to be Kilauea observations. And we'll look in first. Here, let's reload this. This is a live look in at the V1 camera. And there's quite a lot of cloud there in a way, but when I zoom in, you can see some red there when it cracks on that side. There's a spot down in here. But really, to do this justice, let's first also look at the thermal camera, the F1. That's what it looked like about a half an hour ago. So you see that side of the upper part of the lava crust has been recently replaced. It's all solid, as you can see in the V1, but you can see still hot, cooling. Let's reload it and see if it's changed in the last half hour here, or how it's changed, because we know it's changing continuously. So a little cooler there and still hotter around the edges like we just saw on that camera. All right, so first thing I'll do is just note that yesterday, after having decreased Kilauea to advisory yellow status, there was a status report put out by the USGS because of this overturning event on the lava lake and online chatter, presumably, and people are wondering, well, is it actually erupting again? What's going on? Is it starting? Is it stopped? What's really happening here? So this is their clarification. Eruptive activity has not resumed at the summit of Kilauea. The volcano alert level and aviation color code remain at yellow advisory. A passive overturn of the Mauna Loa lava lake began just before noon and continued until about 4 p.m. This was yesterday, December 14th, exposing new lava to surface of the lake. There has been no resumption of seismic tremor, which is indicative of fluid movement, or strong degassing, or supply of lava from the west vent that would be associated with reactivation of the eruption. Seismicity and deformation patterns remain low but unsettled. Potential remains for resumption of this eruption, or initiation of a new eruption at or near the summit of Kilauea, also being noted here. Right? So we kind of have a redeal here, right? All the cards are back in the deck, and we're going to see what's the next hand. And because that shallow pathway to the lava lake has been disrupted, it is in play that you could have some opening elsewhere in the caldera region and the summit of Kilauea. Or, as in the case of Mauna Loa, also you can be near the summit by those rift connectors, but outside of the caldera, but still in the summit region, all within a national park. So we'll see how that plays out over the next few weeks here and potentially longer. But you would presume the easiest path up is the one that's already right there and hasn't really cooled fully or been blocked fully, right? So we'll just wait and see what happens there. So they do add a little bit more here. Observations. The lava lake within Mauna Loa crater began crusting over between December 6th and 9th, and the crust was likely less than 3 feet thick. Small pods of lava appeared in the crust in the northeast corner of the formerly active lava lake just before noon. The weight of the small lava flows on top of the crust caused the immediate area to founder and overturn, exposing the underlying lava within the Mauna Loa crater. Following each overturn, another small flow progressed onto the adjacent crust, causing another 5 to 10% of the adjacent lake crust to founder and sink. The process repeated itself over the next several hours, and by 4 p.m. today, the entire surface of the small lake was resurfaced with new crust. This was yesterday. The process is driven by hotter, buoyant lava rising below the lake's surface and weighing down the surface crust, causing it to sink. Passive overturns are not uncommon in cooling lava lakes, and this activity may be repeated during the next several weeks. And so, potentially several more weeks of this. I always like to note that during the Kilauea eruption in 1959, that was obviously a much smaller crater, but it was also a big lava lake. It's said that the lava lake surface of Kilauea overturned for over a week after that eruption was over, just from the remnant heat and the gases trapped underneath that hardening crust, that when the gases eventually find a path out, some little crack, and they start fizzling out, and they push some lava out through that crack because they're essentially flowing out by their lower density there because they're lighter. That brings the lava on the surface, that's what weighs down the crust, and that's what causes that whole cascading process there. So potentially couple weeks, several weeks, we'll have to wait and see. I have a little bit more to go in on this, but first let's show you what it actually looked like. Here's a view one camera, and starting just before. Looks like I did not start it just before. All right, let's see the sunrise here. I'm going to zoom it in. You see the crust sag, and it pops up and is replaced with the fresh lava there. So let me actually zoom it back out. I wanted to show you guys that sagging motion there. But let's show you the full view. Sagging occurs back in here. You see the flow come out to the side, overrun the surface, harden pretty quickly. Remember, these images are being captured every 15 minutes or so, so I'm really flying through time here. If you're watching this in real time, you'd see it much smoother and progressing and not just flashing here and there. So I'll show you a video of a previous event to help you understand what that looks like. But for completeness, here is that same view from the F1 camera. And I'll zoom it in so you can see there how that lake was actually hardened last week. And here's that cooling phase for the last few days. And the lava pops up here towards the end of this cycle. Here it comes. That first flood over and then resurfacing a couple more times again, and at the edges again, and once more the whole thing. And there is that. So that was the end of that last phase, and then here we go to the more recent one. Here we go again. So that's what it looks like on the thermal. Let me move to show you this series of short videos. So this is back in this same eruption. This is May 2021, as that lava lake was hardening in Halemaumau the first time after the first pulse of this eruption. It was December 2020 to May 2021. So I'll play this for you guys. It does shake a little bit. Let's put it in here. It does shake a little bit because they were zoomed way in back in these days. The lake was way down, but that whole thing is a lava lake that's got a crust on it. You see bubbling occurring down here at the bottom. And that flow starts to come on top of the crust, squeezes onto the crust. This crust starts sagging. There it goes, starts cycling in. Same thing's happening up at the top as well. Here's a really shaky part that's going to pass. But you see vigorous bubbling coming up here. So all the frothy lava is able to come towards the surface. It floods up to the surface. It drowns out all those slabs of crust. See how bubbly and red the whole thing is. You see chunks fall down from the walls. And it looks like it almost starts moving within the lake, off in a direction here. And you see these chunks of crust that are getting overturned within that flow. So really cool, and a small scale bubbling still continuing over there. And what I'm going to do is a couple of things here. First, let's see if this will work. First, just note the lava level after the overturning process. Let's see if we can draw this a little better line. It's more or less in there. And if I put it back earlier, the lake level is actually quite a bit higher. So let's see if I can make it more accelerated. Back, forth. You really see that a lot of what's happening here is a gas burp, right? The gas is built up underneath that crust. The whole thing flashes over, turns red, but also the whole level drops at the same time. So this is interesting processes of really the gas that's in the lava building up enough buoyancy to kind of burst through. And one of the reasons that's sometimes explained is you have lots of small bubbles within a lava. They're all kind of separate little bubbles as the thing has been frothing and moving throughout. But if it starts sitting still for a while, then those bubbles can start to rise and move because there's not as much flow of the lava. They start running into each other. You have little bubbles joining, making bigger bubbles. Eventually the bubbles get to be larger and larger sizes and accumulating in smaller areas. And that's when it can jointly come up and push up and do this process. So that was from the lava lake last year. And I thought I'd go back all the way back to 2006 to this favorite video of ours. This is a gas pistoning video that was within Pu'o'o crater, showing pads of lava being pushed up. The gas bursts out, the lava drops back down the hole, and then the next bubble of gas comes up and pushes that whole plug up the hole and bursts out again. And so this is a gas pistoning process, and just to show how the gas can really be the driver of a lot of this process, really, right? And you see all the lava flowing and moving, and you think, oh, like it's got to be mostly the lava doing it. Look at this one. Look how much lava is into this crater before it all drains back. It goes all the way up, moves around, and flush all the way back down once it pops a bubble. All the way up. So it really has quite a bit of buoyancy. You can lift a good amount of lava within these areas, and especially within a lake that size. So that's the gas piston example. So all that said, let's look back to January of last year and show you guys this actual same process of crustal foundering and resurface. So this video is at 20 times speed. This is a time lapse, and I thought this would be a good way to show you guys how it progresses across the lake. In this case, the lake was a lot bigger. But there it is, it's moving onto that crust and then flowing sideways and consuming it more. So everything here is already hard. You can see the actual zone of foundering is a fairly narrow zone that sweeps across the surface of the lake there, and almost like a fire line in a way. And behind it, you just have the crust hardening once again. Here's an interesting sequence. You have these three lines approaching from different directions, which means that you're building up frothier lava underneath that older, harder crust, and so the whole thing is going to go all at once pretty soon, any second now. And there it goes, right? That's more similar to that first video I showed you guys where the whole thing went all together. And just like that, the whole surface has been replaced with fresh lava, and that's rehardened and recycled that surface crust back into. So a couple examples to hopefully help you understand what that looks like visually. So then in that context, here is an F1 camera for the whole month from December. You see the lava coming in at a pretty good rate, that pretty steady flow, and it starts pulsing a little bit. And then you see the surface harden. A little bit more lava comes in. Surface hardens again. Get some ooze up, late ooze up flows there. This is what we were looking at last week when we said the lava lake had mostly hardened already. Then it becomes even all this stops. USGS drops the alert level. Eruption is officially in pause now. Everything is cooling, and then here we have the secondary pop-up coming in after the fact and recent flash up there. So that's the story here, and we can look at a bigger picture in the weeks to come, but I thought what I would do is rewind back to the end of that first phase. This is from April to May of 2021. I'm going to play you this here. This is obviously sped up as well, but this is what the last phase of this lava lake closing up looked like. It was a bigger surface area. It came in from both sides, made several small ponds there, and then one of those small ponds overturned a few times there. So here it is, a little bit slower, that last phase. That last pond overturning, and it looks like everything actually stops off here. It looks like it's all quiet, and you see it pops up again, and both ponds once again for one last overturn, and then it goes quiet, but still hot and glowing for some time afterwards. So that's what it looked like the last time. We could just have this one secondary pulse of it, and that could be it until the next phase comes up. We've heard the USGS talk about how it could be a matter of just weeks. We thought that could be the case back in May of 2021 as well, and in that case it took 4 months, right? It actually went long enough to overcome the definition of the eruption being over, which is a 3-month window, and then restarted itself 4 months later, and here we are again. So who knows how long it'll take to readjust. It could be weeks, it could be months. It seems on the table as well again to me. And that's really the full context of what we can offer there. I thought we could just close it out with a couple last things. One is just refresh the webcams here, since it'll be getting slightly darker, and maybe what else can we see? And there's that wide view from the KW camera showing the clouds, and still plenty of fume coming up from the crater floor, even if the total emissions aren't very high. A lot of that can be water vapor and other things as well. There's our thermal. Looking at the V1 camera, some obscured by clouds as well. There's a B1 view, so this is a more similar view to what you might see from Kanakako'i viewing area National Park. And the glow would be coming from the back area back in here. And now it's happening not continuously, but when a lava lake is flashing and overturning, which happens for minutes at a time, right? Minutes or hours at a time. So that's the kind of variation you would see there. One last thing, and this is just because I know there's questions out there, and we've talked about it in other ways, and some of you guys haven't seen this before, so I'll just pull this out of the archives here. This is relating Mauna Loa and Kilauea as far as their eruptive volumes, how much they've produced over time. So on the bottom is time. This is 1800, and here is 2000. Right? Now these are plotted in slightly different ways. This bottom one is Kilauea, and this top one is Mauna Loa. So for Mauna Loa, what we're looking at is the total volume of each eruption. So each blue line is an eruption, and the taller the line, the more volume it put out during that eruption. So you can see how often they occurred and how large they were volumetrically there, right? So what you can clearly see is that this period between about 1840 and 1950 is when you get most of them coming in, right? And really that period since 1950 to now, we've had very few, now 3. There's 175, 84, and then we'll have 2022 over here. And the magma volume is probably going to be, I would guess, it's somewhere in a range of, somewhere in here like that, right? Not quite as big as, I can't even see that, something like that. Probably not quite as big as 84, but we'll have to wait to find a volume on there. The bottom plot's showing cumulative volume, right? So rather than just one individual, you're adding them all up one after the other. That's because a lot of this time you have lava lake activity, so it's harder to make them discrete events, right? So you can see as before 1840, Kilauea is gaining volume very quickly. Between 1840 and 1950, it's still gaining volume, but at a much slower rate. And then post-1950, it starts doing it much more quickly again. Right? So this is this interplay between Kilauea, when it's going fast, Mauna Loa is not. When Mauna Loa is going fast, Kilauea is not. And when Kilauea is going fast, Mauna Loa is not. So that's why the USGS is wondering, will Mauna Loa eruptions become more frequent? Are we entering a phase more similar to this, or are we continuing this sparse pattern like this? Is Kilauea still in charge? Is Kilauea still putting it in all its volume? So that's all to be determined, but that's the context that the USGS is talking about, this curiosity of the relationship between the volcanoes and what might happen next, besides the pushing and besides the magma supply and all that, like the actual output can be related in this manner as well. So that is it, Dane. I will stop there. Slightly abbreviated, not very much, but and we can do some questions.
Yeah, first
Some
do a
thank
little bit of
yous.
shout outs. Yeah, appreciate everybody that tuned in today. Rely on viewers like you to like, share, subscribe, all that fun jazz, because it really does help with the algorithm, get it more seen out there. We could have the best information in the world, but if nobody sees it, then it doesn't really matter all that much. So yeah, like, share, subscribe, all that. We also do stream on multiple platforms. We got about 200 people total. But if you're on Facebook and Facebook's being buggy or something like that to you, check out the YouTube. I'll drop a link in the Facebook if you're watching on there right now. And yeah, if you're on the YouTube, we also have a Facebook group that most of the information goes through, and that's really where a lot of the information gets shared and things like that. So we'd recommend joining that as well. All right, I think we have some thank yous to do now. We have a super chat from Chris Kiki, the $20 says, "Thank you, gentlemen." But I want to also thank Ike Air Hawaii for helping us keep an eye on Mauna Loa. Right, we've been working with them for a little while now, set up before the eruption to help us focus on Mauna Loa, and we went through the eruption that way. And now, yeah, we thank them for helping us keep that focus. And if you need to be able to see the lava and stuff like that, we'd recommend these guys. They do same day glasses, they got LASIK, they got basically everything you'd need to do proper eye care out here, and some of the best professional providers that are available on island. So definitely check out Eye Care Hawaii. And we also want to thank County of Hawaii through the 5i grant to help us continue the content on Tracker and on here as well, all the different medium formats and written articles, short videos, all the lives. So yeah, thank County of Hawaii for that. All right, I think I got through everything, and we can hit a few questions. How about that? Oh, all right. So I will assume you're listening and continue on with the questions. John asks, what are the chances Mauna Loa will go another 38 years without erupting?
Good question. We don't know. No, that's a little bit of why I brought up that last slide there. That's kind of the big question is, do we have some surge that's hitting both volcanoes? And is it enough to just erupt Mauna Loa additionally here once in a while? Or has something fundamentally changed in this relationship, right? And if we look at the recent history of the volcanoes, right, Mauna Loa hasn't done really anything for 38 years, but what's Kilauea changed in a major way recently? Obviously, the 2018 eruption, somewhat collapse. Post that eruption, the first thing that we were thinking was, okay, well, maybe Mauna Loa will take her turn now, because Mauna Loa has been under so much pressure from Kilauea. Kilauea perhaps has been inhibiting Mauna Loa as active as it's been, and then for once it had a very major collapse. And at the time, we thought maybe this will give Mauna Loa space to stretch her elbows out, and maybe Mauna Loa will be what actually erupts next. It took a while. We saw Kilauea pop back up first, and we thought, okay, well, I guess that's not how it's going to go. We see Kilauea is back, and the supply is back in Kilauea once again. But the Mauna Loa story was actually continuing, progressing in parallel to that. And it could well be that 2018 had a major hand in allowing Mauna Loa to reactivate here. So did it change it sufficiently? Is it a one-off? Who knows? So those are all who knows questions. We don't have any solid answer. It's just discussing the possibilities here. So really, yeah, we'll wait and see. It seems like 38 years is possibly the longest interval on record. So chances are that it's not going to be that long, right? It could go like 15 years and still be within this unfrequent phase and still be shorter than 30. So, it seems to answer the question precisely, if it was Vegas, I would not bet on it going 38 years without erupting. More than likely it comes sooner than that. But who knows?
Right. I'm going to modify the next question from Richard and just ask, when Kilauea does turn back on, do we expect it to be something big or something more like the lava returning to the lake?
For something big to happen, you have to be able to build up pressure and then keep it inside. You have to contain the pressure so it can build up enough to cause something big. If you have this whole cracked system, then it's hard for it to build pressure anywhere because any one of those cracks can be the weakest link. And if one of those gets plugged up, then rather than building pressure to do something big, it likely leaks out to the next crack. So my personal feeling is, unless it's somehow managed to choke itself off from all the different paths out, all the different weaknesses within the caldera system, that it's likely to not be something big. On a scale of what Kilauea can do, I'll put it that way, right? Because like any fissure always seems big no matter what. Like it could be a tiny little fissure and it seems like a giant thing because it's massively impressive and it's shooting out lava high in the air and all of that, right? So, but what we saw is that even as Mauna Loa has been building pressure for the last few months here, we saw Kilauea start to shift its nature of infilling. Magma's coming in the volcano all the time. It's a matter of how it gets it out or where it puts it, right? So we've been having it come to the surface, but we saw as recently as late September 20th, that intrusion beneath the summit of Kilauea. And that to me was really the beginning of this phase of, another clue in hindsight that Mauna Loa was already inhibiting Kilauea's shallow system. It was starting to already pinch it off, even at that point, apparently, right? So that's what the kind of thing you could see. You could see another intrusion happen beneath the summit. You could see an intrusion happen in the southwest rift like we saw in August 2021 before this phase began, right? And following that last phase, that's what happened between May 2021 and September 2021, was we had an August 2021 intrusion in the upper southwest rift connector. So that's a possibility. And if that intrusion had erupted, it would have been a upper southwest rift eruption of Kilauea, right? We could have an upper east rift of Kilauea within a national park eruption is also a possibility. None of those qualifies as a big thing to me, just so I can qualify what I mean by that, right? But those are all possibilities of something that can happen as magma is looking for a way out, and we do see Kilauea is building pressure underground from the GPS instruments. That's why we show those.
Right. Next question is from Big Island Beach, who says, is there a time we know of where after one summit eruption occurred, another one happened again in the summit in a short period of time, say within a few weeks? Can I start that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the thing that immediately jumps out to me is the time frames, the Stanford, or no, the Smithsonian time scale for declaring an eruption over, which is what we had adopted here basically, means 3 months after the eruption ends. If it restarts within that 3 months, it's the same eruption, right? So if it, sorry, do you want to?
Yeah, I want to just add the location is important. It's not just when it starts and ends, but where it happens too.
Well, yeah, in this question, he's just talking about summit and summit, right? So same, right?
Well, but like, summit's 2 miles wide, and if it erupts out of the, like under Volcano House, that would be a new eruption to me, even if it's still coming out of the summit. So there's a little bit of nuance there, right? And it's complicated how you want to do it. If it erupts like, within quarter mile of the lava lake, do you call it an eruption? Now you have some gray zone to play with, so it's totally valid what you're saying.
Right. Yeah, it gets weird. I mean, we saw that in 2018 with the Fissure Zero, right? And that transition from Pu'u'o down got kind of gray on what do we call is Fissure, or is 2018 Lori's Rift Zone part of the Pu'u'o eruption, or is it a separate eruption?
Right.
But yeah, if we're assuming the same spot type of thing, the same close area, then it would, you would basically be looking at the 2021 or the 2020 and the 2021 eruption, because that one went 3 months. It could pass the 3 months mark, and then less than a month later or a month later, we had a new eruption that, if it would have occurred a month prior, would have been the reactivation, the unpausing of the previous eruption.
Yeah. So like here's another example. For example, we had Mauna Loa began in 1969, and it went through, let's say, in total through 74. But there was a period in 71 where it was interrupted by a fissure at Kinekakoi crater, right? And so there's a separate Kinekakoi eruption that occurs in the middle of Mauna Loa eruption, because it happens, in that case, it was like 4 miles away, something like that. And then eruption went back to Mauna Loa. Mauna Loa continued, and that one's still called a sim eruption, even though there was another eruption that happened in between at Kinekakoi. And then, interestingly, there was another eruption in Kinekakoi in 74 that ended Mauna Loa's eruption, so they kind of ping-pong back a little bit there. But that
was 1 month. The Kinekakoi one was 1 month.
Yeah, well, the fissure, and I want to say it was like a day, like something like that.
Oh, but a 1 month interruption.
The interruption went longer. I want to say it might have been longer than that even. It was
okay.
I don't think they were using this definition at the time, or they would
probably not
possibly call it two eruptions. And some people do. Some people do call it two eruptions, actually. Right? If you go and look at the science literature, they often will refer to it that way.
Yeah, one thing I did notice that was coming out with yesterday. I mean, we saw USGS talking about the gas emissions and the tremor being indicative of the eruption unpausing and stuff like that, and that's an interesting definition to I would argue adjust towards, or at least start standardizing towards it. So like if we check 2018, that wasn't what was being discussed in the updates at any place in it when the reactivation of fissure rate, as it was called, in September, right? So the eruption came to a wind down, went to a pause in August, and then in September we had an event happen. Now, my question is, the events you described, the gas pistoning, the buoyant gas rich rising to the surface, isn't that what fissure rate did?
Same thing. Exactly the same thing. Yep.
But that one was determined to be unpaused officially.
Yes. At the time it was. Yeah. So it seems like the definition now would be looking for the tremor and saying, okay, if there's no magma coming up, then it's actually just like one of these late overturning events, like still during a pause, right? That would have affected things for sure.
That makes a lot more sense to me than just, there's lava at the surface, therefore unpaused, right? But that seemed like what it was in 2018. So the idea to go to tremor and gas emissions, it seems logical to me, and an improvement, a step up.
Yeah, it's definitely notable, right? Because, people would, I'm sure, complain either way, right? If they said, okay, eruption's over, but I see lava and fissure rate. What do you mean eruption's over? Would have been the same deal, right? So I think maybe that was a strategic move to not play it that way, and this time it's on Kilauea and lava lake. Oh, okay, whatever.
Yeah, and I would also argue, like, just me being an outsider almost, that the politics and seeing 2018 and the bureaucracy kind of played into it, just seeing how they were getting pressured, right? Do you remember the county of Hawaii demanding that USGS guarantee them with like 100% certainty that the eruption would not resume before they would do anything, type of thing? I'm like, that's huge pressure, guys. That's unfair, to place upon them, because that now starts infecting their job, type of thing, because they got to play around this thing, and they can't ignore it.
They can't guarantee.
So
nature.
it's rough.
Yeah,
exactly. So it seems like when it's in the crater, they can do a little bit more fine tuning and nuance with it, type of thing. And I hope that gets, we did it for Mauna Loa in the a week ago to declare that over. Doing it for Kilauea to say that it's not unpaused. It's like, all right, let's just keep it and run with it. We'll do gas and we'll do tremor.
Yeah, seems reasonable.
Seems fair to me.
Yeah, but I will continue to note that's not the Hawaiian culture definition, and that doesn't make it any less valid, of course, right? It's just a different definition that the scientists are using with the focus of preparedness and hazard planning in particular, right? So that's what really matters is Pele can still be there and flowing alive, but as far as hazard planning, it's a whole different situation if there's no magma coming up to the surface of the vent, indicated by tremor and gas.
Yep. All right. Well, I think we got through everything. We're coming up on an hour here, so we were trying to make this a little bit shorter of a stream. So let's try and at least say we got in under an hour.
Sounds good.
Sound good? All right. What do you think about stream schedule? Do we want to just what is next week? Is there any holidays that are coming up? The 22nd is our normal scheduled time. Do we want to try and just do a 5 p.m. next week since we have so little activity on both volcanoes? Or do we wanna try and do
I am gonna be out of town next week on
Okay.
Thursday, so we could do one possibly on Monday, if stuff is happening, or you could decide to
Yeah.
to
We'll
to
figure
leave
something
that
out, I
one.
think.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think
But yeah, 5 p.m. We'll try and do something if we got Monday.
yeah. So yeah, maybe Monday, and then maybe Thursday, and then I think we've earned a break too, Dane. I think we could probably, seeing as what's coming up in January with all the talks
True.
every week, it would not be a
Yeah.
bad idea for us to take a week off here.
And
after
I think we
that.
hit enough streams this month to hit our quotas.
Yeah, it wasn't even a concern. Yeah,
Right.
if there's an eruption, it's
All right.
good.
So let's do that then. Let's forego next week's live stream. We'll just say it here and now, and then
Okay.
we'll try and maybe come back on the 29th and do one.
Yep.
Does that work for you?
Yep, sure, we can do
All
that.
right. That we'll call that a plan then. We're taking a little bit of a holiday break, going into take a long weekend into Christmas.
Yeah, and you've seen what to expect. I've shown you guys the glow from the cameras. There's probably more of that, and if something does change, then we'll make sure to post something, or at least put up something short at that event. So
Right.
for a couple
All
weeks,
right.
yeah, until a couple weeks from now, from HawaiiTracker.com, he's Dan DuPont. I'm Philip Ong. Aloha, everybody.